Welcome to Percolating Change, the podcast where we brew better outcomes one sip at a time. I'm Alicia James, and today my guest is Hardeep Kaur, a Director of Business Transformation, Agility and Change Leadership at Merck and Company Incorporated. And the topic for Hardeep this morning is cross-functional team collaboration during transformation. Within the next 10 to 15 minutes, Hardeep will cover one thing that she would do differently and one challenge to watch and share her insights on this topic. Hardeep, give us your one sentence hook to set the table.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. And my one sentence hook would be, transformation is a collective effort, and it really thrives when we collaborate across the boundaries.
Fantastic. I love that. Who is it for? Who is our target audience for this and why now, Hardeep?
Yeah, I mean, the message is intended for the C suite. And one of the reasons why I think it's really prominent in this time is really the amount of changes we are all actually going through, right? So if you really think about it, it's not even quadrupled. I think the number of changes that each person face has really transformed like messing up the word, has multiplied in thousands. Like we used to be like perhaps 1 to 2 changes every month, but now it's like hundreds. So the timing is correct for leadership and the C-suite to really understand how to create that environment to drive the changes and transformational changes.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the same person actually being impacted multiple times. It's not just one or a
Mhm.
couple of projects. So
Mhm.
need to be very cognizant of that. Can you give us an example um, that will sort of describe that a little bit more for our audience?
Absolutely. I mean, when you are thinking of driving transformational changes, one thing that comes to my mind is it's really building that sort of new, environment, or sort of thinking about building something new without the constraints of the past, right? So it's really looking at a very holistic picture of the organizations, looking at the ecosystem, looking at the organizational structure, looking at how information flows through your systems. So I believe that for transformational purposes, it is really looking at how leaders can play a very critical role in driving this transformation within their organization. So this message clearly is any leader who is supporting the transformation or driving or leading that transformation or actually even guiding, because they are the beacon, they're almost the lighthouse for any transformation that needs to be done in their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that in mind, where do you think teams stumble the most here, and what is the most fixable mistake? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there are, I would say, many challenges when you bring cross-functional team together. But the two I would highlight is really the alignment. And um, one of the reasons why I picked alignment was if you bring cross-functional teams together, they all are coming from their own line of business, right? And they
Mm,
all have their own priorities coming from their organizations and their functions.
mhm.
So bringing a group of people together who have their own priorities and not necessarily aligning and setting the priorities for that particular transformation is one of the biggest challenge. And it's not necessarily challenge from skills and capabilities, it's just challenge from direction, because I feel like the organizations and the individuals then are constantly struggling with what to prioritize, right? So that sort of manifests itself in perhaps a delayed decision making, perhaps delays in how people are, sort of maybe coming together to solve problems. So one would be the misalignment, and secondly is just really, I always feel that we underestimate the amount of resources needed for strategy execution and transfer, and we
mm,
always overestimate, right, the capabilities of the organization.
mm,
In my experience, for transformation and for changes, you really have a different type of capabilities. Folks that who can do operational excellence day to day have a different mindset than folks who are really expected to drive changes. So, um, to sum up, I think it's really just sort of that alignment, what I mentioned. And second, is the capabilities and the resources that are required to
mm.
drive those changes.
Two separate things altogether.
Mhm.
If a listener was to start tomorrow, Hardeep, what are, 1 to 3 practical things that they can do?
I would start off with really establishing the new ways of working within that team who is brought together to drive that transformation. I would really also start to focus on the mindset, right, that is required to drive that change, if you will. And thirdly, I would really focus on how do you set up the landscape for the changes to happen? How do you set up your systems? How do you set up your processes? How do you set up your information flow? Few
Mm,
things that you can prep, right, to get the organization ready to embark on that journey.
mm, mm. I love that. I love that word prep, prepare. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the time to actually look at what needs to be done, as you say, look at the landscape, see what's changing,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can leverage methodologies and capabilities to set people up for success. What is one thing that you would perhaps do differently next time, if you could?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good questions, and as I lead through many, many transformations, one thing I would do different is to from the very beginning ensure that the mobilization of the teams happen at the right time. So what I mean by that, the teams who are in charge of supporting these transformations are activated in the right time. So sometimes, we are not necessarily syncing that up,
Mm,
and we're a little bit further into driving the transformation or the change initiative, and then we activate our support team or our team of champions.
mm.
So onboarding them early, to be your advocates is actually a good idea because it takes time for them to absorb the change and actually believe in the change.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I think that's such a good lesson for everybody, to be honest. Because when you think of it, we all, even change people landing on a project, there is some time before you can actually ramp up to what you really want to do. You have to get to understand it, accept the change,
Mm-hmm.
and know how you can support people. And the same
Mm-hmm.
absolutely goes with advocates and subject matter experts. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that. And in the same sort of theme, I guess, because we're nearly coming to the end, what is one challenge you think in this context that we should watch over the next 6 to 12 months from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges I notice is the technological advancements, right? The pace is very, very difficult to keep up with. Additionally, you're trying to build the old strategy of sort of like 3 to 5 year plan that doesn't exist anymore. So I think there's a lot of pressure on organizations to be extremely agile. And while you have your North Star defined, while you have your path sort of carved out that this is the ultimate goal we have as an organization, we have to be extremely agile and extremely flexible, right, to really revisit the strategy or the plan at some sort of frequency much quicker than the 3 to 5 year
Mm,
plan we used to have before.
mm. Yeah, it's not allowing us to use our initiative as well too, and to react
Mm-hmm.
appropriately when you've got a 3 to 5 year plan because you're following the
Mm-hmm.
path as to what's happening in the environment. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make much sense, really, does it? When we think about it, but that's how we
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
do it. And that's how we still work, I think, for a lot of organisations. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about a myth? Is there a myth you'd like to bust with this particular topic?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I have noticed, and where successful change or changes are successful in an organization is how much in concert do you work with the PM, right, the project management and the portfolio office. They have to be extremely integrated. But I think the biggest myth is the change is a linear process, just
Hmm.
like project management is. I think that is absolutely not the case. The way you track your project milestones are very different than how you track individuals and organizations or teams traveling through the change, because change is very personal.
Hmm.
You know, you can cluster a group of people together, but every single person is actually going to be traveling through that change curve at a different piece. So it's the myth is, put it in some sort of linear fashion on paper and try to measure the installation and the adoption. I don't think so that's the case. I think that's a very big myth that you cannot track change as milestones and targets,
Hmm.
um, because people travel differently through that curve.
And just because I'm just very curious, how would you go about that then? If someone, a project manager, says, "Well, look, here's my schedule. We're put, this is landing at X time, and you've got a situation where you've got a very important team that needs to be onboarded successfully before. How do you juggle? What does that communication look like? That conversation look like?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, right? So,
Asking myself.
yes. So fortunately, unfortunately, we all measure by metrics and data, right? And if you don't measure, if you're not tracking something, you obviously can't monitor or improve it, right? So much that I said that it's not a linear process, you still have to put enough parameters in place to see, are we going on the right direction, right? So while we cannot measure where is everyone is on this particular point, I think we need to just look at the trajectory of the journey of individuals, like on that change curve, if you will, because some are going to go faster, some may fall off, right, that curve, some may go much, some may jump some of the phases, like of your awareness and understanding into adoption. So while it's not linear, there are still milestones that you can measure in terms of how people travel. So I would rather focus on that, make sure there's enough data that you collect through all kinds of analysis that you can do right now,
Yeah.
and track that adoption, if you will.
I absolutely agree. And also, it gives you an opportunity to mitigate in some ways, doesn't it? You know, target your comms, whatever it is the strategy is to bring people
Hmm.
along, gives you that opportunity because it's not linear, that there are, a lot of different measurements you
Correct.
can, yeah, to make sure that you're addressing the concerns
Yeah.
as we all go differently along that journey.
Yeah.
So this is the end of our session, Hardeep. Thank you for joining me so much. I want to ask though, how can people get hold of you? Because I love watching you on LinkedIn and the many things that you do. How can people get in touch and reach out for your services should they wish?
Yeah, absolutely. I am extremely passionate about the topic of change, and particularly change leadership. I love talking about transformation and then strategy development and execution. So you can absolutely find me on LinkedIn at Hardeep Kaur, under Hardeep Kaur, and I'm very active. Like, so I post a lot, and I'm also interacting with many folks like yourself, who are equally passionate and trying to drive this, and build a community. So, yeah, happy to engage.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Percolating Change. And that's it, folks, for today's Sip on Percolating Change. If you found this useful and would like to hear more sessions, please like and subscribe and check out the playlist for the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Alicia.
You're welcome.